In the previous episode, we took a look at OT security and how it differs from IT security. But how does an OT attack works? Let's find out today in Threat Talks The Deep Dive, where we dive deep into an OT security attack. Let's get on to it.
Welcome to Threat Talks. Let's delve deep into the dynamic world of cybersecurity.
My guest of today is Luca Cipriano, who's the CTI and Red Team program lead here at Ontoit. So welcome, Luca.
Thanks. Hi.
My name is Rob Maas, field CTO at Ontoit. If you missed the previous episode, we're going to discuss a lot of buzzwords today, like HMI, PLC, SCADA, and the Purdue model. If you have no idea what those are, please take a look at the previous episode before watching this one. Luca, today we dived deep into OT security and how an attack works. How does it start? What do we have kind of tools? Do you have something?
Okay. So first of all, I will say one of the key difference that are between IT and OT attack are the intent of the attacker. So, like for example, when we see attackers that are interested in economical gain, they will just get into a network, then get the data, threaten to leak it unless they get a pain, or maybe get a ransomware. So that's basically what they do. But in this kind of attacks, so especially when they're interested in the OT infrastructure, the attacker main goal is to remain stealthy and position himself in a place where then it can act on the objectives when the time is the right time. So can be like a political reason or like cyber warfare or hacktivists or these kind of things. But the main thing is they want to be stealthy until they're able to then do what they want to do. So this is one of the key, the differences in attack. It's more like also you see that in cyber espionage is a bit similar.
In IT, we have what we call the cyber kill chain.
Yes.
So is there something similar for ICS?
So yes. So in 2015, the SANS published an ICS cyber kill chain, which is slightly different from the normal cyber kill chain, and it is divided in two stages. So the first stage is the cyber intrusion and the preparation for the attack. And basically, that's you're familiar with the cyber kill chain, right?
I am, at least on the IT part.
Yes. So basically, that's more or less the same. You have the steps like reconnaissance, then they have weaponization, delivery, exploitation, all those steps that they do to gain initial access within the network. And one of the things that they do at this stage is they try to get also information about the OT infrastructure. So, for example, what brand of PLC is used. So, for example, one of the problems that we have with OT network is that there's like a lot of different protocols, a lot of proprietary. So every brand can have their own protocols to work. So and every OT infrastructure is different from each other. It depends on the industry or what they do. So you don't have like in the IT, you have the same more or less infrastructure.
If I want to figure out how I can, for example, attack you, and I know after my reconnaissance that you run Windows, then I can simply spin up a Windows machine and see if I can find some vulnerabilities in there
you can do that, like for example, and also now we know, okay, and in the typical OT infrastructure you have like a file server, mail server, Active Directory. That's more or less the same things over and over. But industrial is not like that. Industrial systems are different. They use different devices. They use different protocols. They're built in a different way. So then the attacker needs to understand that. Like a part of this stage one could be, if you think about it, in the past there was Schneider Electric got a breach in 2024, and the attacker stole 40 gigabytes of data related to ICS and SCADA systems. So this could be also one of the steps that it's precursor for the stage two. Because
so this was an IT attack?
Yes.
Just to gather information for potentially an OT.
Well, I mean, this specific one was like a ransomware attack. So they basically wanted money. And the funny thing is, like, it was done by a group called Hellcat, and they requested something like $125,000 to be paid in baguette. So they wanted.
Okay, but were not the baguettes that you can eat, right?
Well, we don't know. Well, there was a cryptocurrency also called baguette, but there were not enough to pay $125,000. The total supply couldn't match the request, so we don't know. It's possible also that was just they were teasing them because Schneider Electric is originally from France, so that could be why there's baguette, but we don't know. But anyway, if you have this, attackers can be interested in this because you get blueprints, IPs about how those industrial systems are built, and that is part of the reconnaissance as well. That could be one of the steps that is involved. But aside from that, the main cyber kill chain is to gain initial foothold on the network of the target and start to map how it is, trying to be stealthy and position yourself in a way that you can reach the OT network. And the complex part here is also that they need to try to understand what kind of systems they use. But for example, PLCs and this kind of systems are quite fragile. So it is possible that if you run a port scan on that, you could cause a DOS, a denial of service, which will have an impact, and maybe break something, but it's not an intentional impact. And it
will raise an alarm.
It will raise an alarm as well. So they need to be really cautious in this stage.
Yeah. So stage one, if I compare it with IT, the reconnaissance, gaining information about the systems will take a lot more effort and time than for a normal, standard IT.
Yes, indeed, and that's why you mainly can. The profiles of the attackers are more like APTs or state actors or maybe hacktivists or
well-paid groups.
Because it's time intensive as well. It requires time. It requires set of skills as well. So,
and do you know if it is common if you want to attack an OT infrastructure that the attackers, they will gain the knowledge, they will figure out what kind of components they run, that they're also building it themselves and at a lower scale?
Yes, that is one thing that, of course, they need to do, because, of course, when you know, they use this PLC with this software, with this program, and then they have an idea that they need to, of course, that there is a... this is part of the stage 2, by the way. So we're going a bit further in time. But let's start with stage 2. That is the stage 2 of the ICS cyber kill chain. And one of the steps, exactly, that's what you mentioned, is develop and tune. They use
what we call the weaponization normally.
Yes.
Is here step 2, the start of step 2.
The start of step 2. Yeah, basically they have once in the previous step of the cyber kill chain, they got all this information, and now they when they identify all the ICS components, they need to also just gather those components and then just try to see with the software how they works and how they can craft the payload they need to use. So then there's a second step that is like a testing phase. So they try to reconstruct the infrastructure, and they will see how they can approach it and what kind of payloads can work. After this, then there's similar to the cyber kill chain, we have the delivery step. So they need to find a way on how to...
one back step the testing.
Mm-hmm.
In the previous episode, we learned that we have the HMI controlling PLCs and PLCs and controlling the sensors or communicating with the sensors. If you rebuild this scenario, then I can also imagine that the PLCs or the HMI have specific software for the company that you're trying to breach. How do they try on forehand to steal that software, or do they mimic it? Or
so as I mentioned before, one of the things was the imagine the Schneider Electric leaks. You can find a lot of information there. You can have probably APTs that do cyber espionage, that they can get information about this. They can get this kind of blueprints and this kind of information. Once you're in the network and you manage to get, for example, in a host that gets the readings from the PLC and the things, you can understand you can know which software is installed, and you can get, for example, from the readings that is receiving, the bits and the bytes that you can check how they're receiving, what they're reading, you can determine how it is built as well. So there are different ways to do that.
Okay.
So some parts require reconnaissance at the stage. Some parts may require cyber espionage. Some parts might require like getting some information from other data leaks. And as you guys can imagine, it's a bit complex. It's not so easy. So once this part is done, then of course they need to find a way to deliver the payload. That's the same as we have in the cyber kill chain step 1. And then of course they need to install it. So change the logic in the PLCs or in the HMIs, or modify the firmware based on how they built it. And then at this point, they can execute the attack.
Okay. If I look at prevention, of course, we want to prevent these kinds of attack from happening. If you look at stage 1, so the reconnaissance and gathering.
One is the normal cyber kill chain.
But okay, so we could take the same measures to hopefully prevent that blueprints are being leaked, or that people get information from the company on what's running, what's being used, etc. For stage 2, the execution, the delivery, and the execution, are there things that we can do to prevent these attacks?
I think that the prevention steps are more or less the same. It just changes a bit the way the attacker perform these kind of attacks and the preparation that they need to have.
So we have the zero trust once again, for making sure that you get only access to resources that you need.
Exactly.
Small segments, so you cannot easily move around laterally to deliver your software.
Least privilege approach on the users. And if you can imagine, like most of the engineering station anyway, they runs on Windows. So like you can have like EDR solutions, these kind of things on those workstations. Also something that can help. But more or less, again, we go back to the basic cyber security hygiene that you need.
In the previous episode, we also discussed the Purdue model and how zero trust can be applied to it and make it a stronger model. Would it help in this stage also if the different functional domains or the protect services are being segmented also on the lowest 3 layers of the Purdue model?
Well, definitely will make the attacker's life much harder. Yeah, because then it will involve additional steps in order to reach their objectives, and maybe it gives also additional opportunities for the defenders to notice that something is going wrong. So that will make for sure the attacker's life.
Okay, that's always good to do.
Yeah, of course. Everything that improves security is good to do. For sure.
You already mentioned that if an attacker is not stealthy and silent enough, do port scans on PLCs, for example, that it might cause a kind of a denial of service attack on the PLC. What are other more things that an attacker can do? Because it makes it unavailable. Are there other things an attacker can do?
So, of course, this depends on the target, because as you can imagine, like we talk about OT, but OT is big, like for sure, like a nuclear power plant, it's way more complex, and you can do way more things than egging in a HVAC in a system of a hospital, for example. You know,
we have, of course, a very famous example on nuclear facilities.
Oh yeah, the Stuxnets.
Exactly. Yeah.
So indeed, so that involves more complex. But well, it depends on what they're attacking. Difficulties changes, but there are different goals that they can reach. So, for example, they can point something at a loss of view, so that they tamper with real time. The monitor that displays real time process data. So the engineer can't see anymore that. They can also do like manipulation of view. So basically they show different numbers or different stages or status of the OT system to what it actually is. So the engineer doesn't see what is really happening. And then you can
maybe also trigger an engineer to
change something
settings
that shouldn't change. And then, you have like the denial of control or loss of control. So, for example, the engineer can't anymore control the process. You have like something like denial of safety. So you can, as we spoke also in the previous episode, you can tamper with safety measures that creates also like life hazard for people and workers that are there. So there are different goals that the attacker can achieve.
Okay, and I can also imagine that sometimes it works for an attacker to combine these goals. So you would tamper with the safety systems, which normally would cause, hopefully, an alarm on the monitoring, but you also manipulate the alarm on the monitoring system.
Yeah, indeed, the data. So you can do more things. And of course, the complexity of the attack varies with the complexity of the OT infrastructure that they are targeting.
Okay. Well, I think it already became pretty clear that those attacks are pretty complex. You need a lot of information, a lot of front work even to try to get to an attack and a weapon that you can use. So what would be typical threat actors in this domain?
I did not really understand your question.
So in OT security, what would be the threat actors that we recognize? Would it be a script kiddie?
As I mentioned before, it will be mostly like nation state actors, like Bolt Typhoon that we discussed before, or like, I would say like hacktivists. So people that have like interest for some political beliefs or something that don't align with their view of ethics. They attack a specific company or industry because of those reasons. So those are probably the main threat actors that we will see carrying these kind of attacks.
Okay, and maybe related to this. Sorry.
No, sorry.
Maybe related to the. It sounds much easier than that I just pay someone on the inside to execute something for me. Is that a real risk with OT security?
Yes, of course. Insider threat is always like think about Stuxnet. We mentioned it before. How did they manage to get the malware into what was supposed to be air gapped? So they had somebody that brought it in. So yeah, definitely an insider threat is something that these kind of attackers can use, and it will help for the initial foothold or also for the delivery stage of the malware. Another thing it can be that, but is more an unintended consequences, like a ransomware group that pulls a ransom on a company that has also IT infrastructure that can lead to, that has also OT infrastructure that can lead to a shutdown of that as well. Like we have seen it with like the Colonial Pipeline, for example. So it was just a ransomware attack, but then they just shut down their OT infrastructure. So it created some issues, but that's more like an unintended.
Although I think it can be a very strong mechanism, I would say, to get your money, because if you make critical infrastructure unavailable, people, it's even worse than having to not have your data.
But I will say if you like are targeting, like for example, a critical infrastructure, you create a huge impact, and what are the likelihood that they're gonna pay you? Like, I mean, that's and I think that when you ransomware a company, you have always this thing like about you don't know if they pay the ransom or not. A lot of times it's still this gray area or how they did it. But when you impact a critical infrastructure and you create a problem that is a problem also for a state, then the nation is involved as well. So it's not something that you can just say, we didn't pay or whatever. So that there's more like attention to it. Like everybody knows it. Also people that are not familiar with IT, and the government also will just be involved in the incident response and all this kind of thing. So
okay, yeah. And what we can conclude, I think, today is that an OT security attack is really complex. Requires a lot of time and also therefore a lot of smart people and money, of course.
Yeah.
Do you think organizations are well prepared to counter an OT attack, or do they not realize what the potential impact would be?
Yeah, I think that there's a problem. It's quite tough because I think now we're at the stage where cybersecurity or IT meets engineering. So there's a lot of knowledge gaps that also like, for example, incident response people have. So if there's an incident and they need to do forensic and they look at, I don't know, some OT things they've never seen, who have ever seen like a
PLC controller?
No, well, not only that, but like a whole turbine infrastructure of a dike or whatever. Like you have no clue, like you've never done with that, and so they need to up the skills and probably the communication between engineering and OT, like more sharing the knowledge in that case can help. But aside from that, also you have, for example, as we mentioned in the previous episode, legacy systems there. So that's quite difficult to probably redesign all your network, especially if you have like a chain of distribution or whatever, like an OT industry can have, that you can't halt it. You need to change things that might break other things, and you need to really like put your hands on legacy infrastructure, and it's not so easy. So I think there's a lot of work to do there. There's a lot of work to do to gain more knowledge about IT and OT for us, for cybersecurity specialists, but also for engineers that are only like, give the example of the electrical engineer, that they only have engineering background. They probably should get also a bit more of a cybersecurity concept and be more familiar with that. So we should try to help both the sides.
Bridge the gap between those two teams.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we're already doing that, by the way. We look at Hack the Boat. I think that's a good example.
Yeah.
We also have an episode about that, where we really show what can go wrong. I think if you look at the security measures, like we also said in the previous episode, they are more or less the same, or at least the same thinking goes behind it.
Yeah.
But I think what you point out fairly is that the observability, root cause analytics, getting logging from such systems is slightly different than in traditional IT systems. What would be your advice? We come to an end. You know now that the attacks are really complex. What would be your advice to organizations?
To focus on their cybersecurity. I mean, all these attacks anyway. The first, it always starts with a normal IT attack. I mean, they need to be in your network. So already just focusing on the IT infrastructure and try to apply the zero trust, apply zero trust architecture, or monitoring, having an internal SOC or like an MSSP that can help you with that to make sure that you understand what is happening in your network, or help you redesign the network. That could be already a good step, because of course that's their initial foothold is the IT network. So start from there.
Since a lot of OT environments can have an impact on the whole nation, do you think it's pushed enough by law and by regulatory instances that they've pushed those organizations already, or do you think that they should push
I think
harder?
we're getting there, but it will take time still. And as you are familiar with, like when you look at compliance and regulatory, they're often really like a high level, so that you can fit whatever you want within.
Not very specific.
No, so it should be a bit more, but also because there is a lack of knowledge. So maybe having extra guidelines that will explain how to do that could help for sure. Yeah. Okay,
I think that will bring us to a conclusion. So, again, it's very complex attacks, not very easy to execute. So it's not a thing that a script kiddie can do. At least normally. It starts just in most cases with IT. I think Stuxnet is one of the exceptions here. It can impact the whole nation if OT security is being compromised, especially if you talk about energy or water systems, those niche facilities. So to conclude here, to you listener, it might be time to really see what do you have, what kind of OT environment do you have, and plan around it to secure it, both IT and your OT environment. And also know that most of these attacks are being not easy to execute, so you might have some little time to execute those plans. And with that, I conclude, just plan and protect your environment. Thanks for listening. If you like what you saw, so please like and subscribe. Helps us to spread the word further. And with that, thank you.
Thank you for listening to Threat Talks, a podcast by Onto It Cybersecurity and AMS-IX. Did you like what you heard? Do you want to learn more? Follow Threat Talks to stay up to date on the topic of cybersecurity.